I urge everyone to continue to show restraint and respect the rules which are designed to keep us all safe.
Welcome to WatchMojoUK, and today we're looking at politicians and members of parliament who have been convicted of crimes in Britain's recent past.
What does that say about a member of the House of Lords?
They call themselves a noble lord. There was no nobility in that.
Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
The Cambridge Five.
12 years earlier, his disappearance one summer night had delivered a body blow to British intelligence.
While the Cambridge Five all worked for the British government, they're the only people on our list who weren't democratically elected to some kind of position by the British people.
So why did Guy Burgess and others in his gilded circle betray their class and their country?
The five met while studying at Cambridge and ended up passing heaps of information to the Soviet Union after rising through the ranks of the Foreign Office, going almost totally uncaught until they got too paranoid and started to flee to Russia.
To consolidate his cover story, Burgess wanted to get a job here, then the newly opened headquarters of the BBC.
One of them, Kim Philby, even worked for MI6 while passing hundreds of files over to the KGB for years. They're also the only people on this list not convicted of a crime, because they ran off to the USSR before any charges could be brought against them.
He's passed through the communist measles that so many of our clever young men go through and is well out of it.
Chris Huhne. In 2013, Chris Huhne and his then wife Vicky Price were convicted of perverting the course of justice.
Very clearly I should not have swapped points with my ex-wife.
Huhne was a Lib Dem MP who served in the government during the coalition, but his career was destroyed when Price, apparently feeling vindictive because they'd separated, told the tabloids in 2011 that he'd persuaded her to take penalty points on her driving licence for him.
And people should believe you this time because you're admitting to having been a liar.
Though the incident had happened back in 2003, it wasn't until 2012 that they were charged. The trials were fraught with drama and false claims that Huhne had tried to get even more people to take on the burden of his licence points, but he ultimately resigned and went to prison for 2 months. Humiliatingly, he was tagged upon release.
It's hard to imagine there could be much more. I mean, the details that people saw were awful.
Yes, they certainly were, but you have to remember, sadly, that was police evidence.
Jonathan Akkin.
It's been 26 years since Jonathan Akkin wielded his simple sword of truth and then lied and lied and lied.
In 1995, Tory MP and Cabinet Minister Jonathan Akkin was accused of backdoor deals with Saudi Arabia by The Guardian. He promptly took them to court for libel, only for it to become clear that none of what The Guardian had said was libelous at all. He was then found to have committed perjury during the expensive libel trial, a charge to which he soon pled guilty in 1999, landing himself 18 months in prison, though only 7 were served.
Now, having been to prison, found God and started work as a vicar, he's in a better position to provide counsel to MPs.
He also tried to sue Private Eye for libel, which has consistently mocked him in the decades since because all those legal actions left him bankrupt. He's since repented and become a minister in the Church of England.
Did prison and finding your vocation change your view of your own conduct?
Yes, enormously so.
Fiona Onna.
A qualified solicitor, Fiona Onna, must have known as she arrived at court today she was likely to lose her liberty.
The one-time Labour MP for Peterborough, Onna was removed from office after a conviction for perverting the course of justice. This was very similar to the Chris Huhne affair, as again it came down to covering up driving offences, in this case speeding. Plenty of people get speeding tickets and points on their licence, but Onna lied and said her brother had been driving and then went back and forth for weeks about whether she could remember who'd driven the car or not.
Just a week later, her Nissan Micra was caught speeding. Recorded at 41 miles an hour in a 30 mile an hour zone.
It dragged on for months, but Onna didn't resign, instead waiting for the Labour Party to forcibly remove her. She then compared herself to figures in the Bible and said she'd been wrongly convicted. The courts have, so far, disagreed.
Despite being found guilty and expelled from the Labour Party, Miss Onna is refusing to resign, saying the £77,000 salary is her only income.
John Stonehouse. While this entire story is deeply farcical, It's still very serious to try and fake your own death and flee to Australia, and you have to wonder what kind of person is capable of concocting such a scheme.
I agree, yes, that the figures there have been somewhat disappointing.
After being accused multiple times of being a Czech spy, accusations that turned out to be true in 2010, Stonehouse found himself in massive amounts of debt and decided that the best way out was to fake his death in 1974.
I can't pretend that everything has gone just as I would have expected or hoped.
He disappeared and went down under with his secretary, but was caught because he was behaving suspiciously. Most bizarrely, Aussie police actually thought that he was Lord Lucan, a murder suspect who vanished the same year, never to be seen again. Stonehouse defended himself, failed, and wound up in prison, all while still an MP.
Well, if you continue to take that attitude, and quite unreasonably in my view, there's plainly nothing I can do, is there?
Claudia Webb. Another Labour MP, Webb was kicked out of the party in 2021 following a conviction of harassment.
Now, this was something that Claudia Webb had denied. Her case for the defence was that this was about COVID.
She never went to prison for this because her sentence was reduced to community service and a paltry £50 in compensation for the victim. But the crime remains disturbing.
And therefore it's important that we allow that investigation to happen.
The woman she threatened was having an affair with Webb's partner, and the court case quickly became shambolic. Webb's evidence was poor, though she did plead not guilty, and some of the evidence turned out to be completely fabricated by the prosecution. Because of this, the CPS then had to pay her compensation. She did still commit the crime she was accused of, though.
Giving that summing up, he said that her evidence was vague and inconsistent. At some points, he thought it had been made up on the spur of the moment.
Jeffrey Archer.
After awarding Kathleen Burnett first prize in a short story competition, what did Archer do?
Steal the story and pretend it was his own in a next collection.
He's easily one of the most unscrupulous people to ever be involved with the British political establishment, which is certainly saying something. He started getting involved in scandals in the 1970s while still a Tory MP, but also briefly served as deputy party chairman. In 1987, while chairman, he won a libel suit against a newspaper, only for the truth to come back and bite him 12 years later, when he was accused of perjury and perverting the course of justice in said trial.
Which post, which never existed, did Archer claim his father had held?
He said his father was a colonel in the Somerset Light Infantry who'd won a Distinguished Conduct Medal, which he hadn't.
He served only a few years of his sentence, but continued to be a member of the House of Lords for over 20 years. It just goes to show, everybody gets caught eventually.
During an athletics race at Oxford in October 1963, what achievement propelled Archer into the national press?
He was hit by a discus, amusingly.
And stretchered off whilst competitors cheered.
The expenses scandal.
MPs were always underpaid, going back into the 1980s and 90s.
Multiple MPs actually ended up serving custodial sentences for their part in the 2009 MP expenses scandal. While lots of the expenses, while dodgy, were actually valid things for MPs to claim for under this rigged system, not all of them were overlooked by the courts.
So, what had happened was the whips had quietly said to MPs, look, just push through some expenses claims of this and that.
6 politicians were given prison sentences, while a 7th, Margaret Moran, was deemed unfit to stand trial to nearly 24 charges for false accounting and forgery, after claiming over 50 grand from the public purse.
We gave commitments to Parliament that we were treating the information, which we did, very sensitively. We had every MP's private address, bank details, we had everything.
Dozens more MPs were investigated for their claims, and incidents like this are likely a big part of why MPs are actually statistically more likely to be convicted of crimes than ordinary Brits. Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson.
3 months ago, Prime Minister walked into Downing Street promising integrity, professional and accountability. That's trickier now.
Were their crimes that bad? Possibly not. But they did both receive fixed penalty notices for various offences, which is more than most ex-Prime Ministers. The big notices came, of course, from Partygate, with Sunak, Boris and also Carrie Johnson being landed with fines for the notorious lockdown party held in Downing Street.
Today I've received a fixed penalty notice from the Metropolitan Police relating to an event in Downing Street on the 19th of June 2020.
Considering Rishi Sunak is richer than King Charles III, and Johnson has never been short on cash either, they probably hardly noticed the £50 penalties. Sunak was later hit with another one though, for being in a car without wearing a seatbelt. How did the police catch him for this, you ask? Because he posted a video of him doing it while trying to promote the Tories' levelling up policies.
After looking into this matter, we have today issued a 42-year-old man from London with a conditional offer of fixed penalty.
Nazir Ahmed.
We've heard a series of allegations about this man, Nazir Ahmed, Lord Ahmed, from women who say requests for political help were met with requests for sex.
Though he's been a life peer in the House of Lords since the 90s, the Lords are currently looking for a way to expel him for his crimes.
She was shocked by his behaviour and says she didn't contact him for more than a month.
As well as going to prison for driving offences in 2007, like many MPs, in 2022 he was convicted of sex offences dating back decades. We won't go into detail about the crimes, but they were horrific, and he was handed a 5-year sentence.
She said, Lord Ahmed used my trust to repeatedly have intercourse with me. I feel I've been preyed upon due to my vulnerability and used by Lord Ahmed.
2 of his brothers were also convicted of similar crimes, though Ahmed's sentence was later reduced because he himself had been a minor when the offences had been carried out. Various attempts to overturn his convictions have failed.
He basically wanted to sleep with me.
You sure about that?
100%. Why does a man want a woman to come and stay the night in his house or his flat or whatever?
Let us know in the comments if you think convicted criminals should be allowed to sit in Parliament.
She's been convicted of a very serious offence. She's let herself down, she's let the people of Peterborough down.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojoUK and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.